Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Nate Caywood and I'm a Los Angeles-based cinematographer, and I created this YouTube channel with the intention of breaking down the works of the best cinematographers on the planet in the hopes that by reverse engineering their work, I might be able to learn how they're doing what they're doing, steal their tricks, and figure out how to become a better cinematographer myself, and hopefully you guys can learn something along the way. Okay, so today I want to talk about a very specific lighting setup that is once again pretty difficult to achieve, and we'll be exploring it in Cine Designer. And I came up with this idea because it was presented to me by Jared Films. He commented on my latest video about how to light somebody when they're backlit by a window and asked me if I'd be interested in exploring the idea of lighting two characters at a doorway. And I thought it was a great idea. So please show him some love. Please go to his YouTube channel, which is incredible, which I am a fan of. I realized that looking at his work, I had watched many of his videos before I even started my own channel. So go give him some love, Jared Films. Just know that we are talking about this today because of his suggestion. So feel free to leave me some comments below and let me know what you guys want to learn about for specific lighting setups, and we'll see if we can explore them and find some solutions that we can all get better at this craft. Okay, let's get into it. So today, the subject that we're talking about is two characters talking from a doorway, like an entrance doorway to a house, an apartment building, a hotel room. So because this is such a difficult subject of lighting, I figured I would go to the best. We're only looking at 3 films today. We're looking at Killers of the Flower Moon, shot by Rodrigo Prieto, who was nominated for an Academy Award for his work. We were looking at Arrival, which is shot by Bradford Young, who was nominated for an Academy Award for his work. And we are looking at Robert Yeoman shooting Wes Anderson's first feature film, Bottle Rocket. Okay, so first things first, let's get into Killers of the Flower Moon. This is just, I just wanted to show this because this is an establishing shot. I think it's interesting because it kind of shows you the level of exposure and how hot the sun is behind them. So this is the first image. This is an image of Leonardo DiCaprio opening the door to Jesse Plemons. Okay, so first thing that we want to notice is that he is mostly keyed on this side of his face, right? Which is, I would describe it. Now, look, I've noticed from doing these YouTube videos that everybody has their own definition of where the 180 line is and what far side key is, and it's always subjective, and let's all just be friends. Okay, so if I'm pointing his nose and I'm putting it this way, I would say that the light is coming from this side of the 180 line, which makes me believe that it is a far side key because it is darker here and is lighter here. That would be my premise. Others could disagree with it. That is my premise. So one thing that I think we'll notice is when we're trying to create shape in these situations is let's notice the level of ambience that's going on in the room. I think as we get into Cine Tracer, we'll see that if we bring up the ambience is too high, it's going to be difficult to get levels of contrast here, and they're going to feel completely flat lit. Because let's think about the way that this is set up, right? So top-down view, this is a person standing at a doorway, essentially, right? Like, and the door is like this, basically, for all intents and purposes. I know that his body is shifted separately, but all the light is coming in from this direction. So he's going to be pretty flat lit. That's what we're talking about today and how to sort of control that. Darker on this side, lighter on this side. Now, I think the really important thing to notice is notice the levels of contrast that are taking place in this image. Let's look at the level of the coverage that's shot against it. So what makes this setup incredibly difficult is that you want this image because all the light is coming from outside, inside. Everything is coming from outside here, inside here. It's hard to not keep them flat lit, so it's hard to create contrast. On the other hand, when you go to this side, they're completely backlit, so it's hard to bring up level on their face over here or here to create contrast in this side of the coverage because they're completely backlit by all of this stuff, which makes it difficult to expose their face without silhouetting them. Okay, so notice that he's keyed on this side, light is brought in here to back edge him, and there's like a little bit of depth and contrast in his face here. And I guess the idea is that the sun is sort of bouncing off something to come back up here, and same there, maybe? I don't know. Let me know what you think is being used to motivate these lights on Jesse Plemons' face, but just a reminder, this is what the coverage looks like. To me, it feels not very bright, and then we come out here and it feels like a much brighter scene. Okay, moving on. I just want to go through all of the images first, and then we're going to hop into Cine Tracer and we can see what we're doing. Okay, this is Arrival, shot by Bradford Young. Incredible. I love this movie. It appears that the sun is sort of up here and casting light this way, or maybe a little bit further this way, and it's coming straight down. But it's definitely very toppy. They've flown some sort of heavy diffusion rag large enough to cover this entire space all the way across. The reason that I think that is because there's a shadow under her nose and sort of under her eyes, so it feels like it's top lit. So, like, let me know if you disagree with that. So, my guess is they flew a pretty heavy diffusion over this, and they're just using direct sunlight. And so that creates a totally different shape than the DiCaprio coverage, right? The DiCaprio coverage is sort of like 50-50 coming across his eye to catch the other cheek, right? This is the sun is directly above head or close to being directly above head, and that they're softening it up, and maybe there's a little return on this side. It does feel like this side is darker than this side. Let me know what you guys think, but I mean, maybe a quarter or half of a stop. I mean, not even that much. I mean, it's mostly bright here. It's bright on the top of her nose. It's bright on the top of her head. So it is some sort of top light that's happening. They're probably diffusing it down. Just another thing that I want to point out as a reminder is like, just notice how low the level inside the house is, right? So that's, if she was even a step further back, it would help create even more contrast. But as she comes out, she's coming out into the light. So just something to remember is, what is the level inside when the character is coming outdoors? Okay, so this is the other coverage of this scene, which I think is incredibly interesting. So the sun is over here, probably backlighting him coming this way, right? Because you can see on this side of the building behind him is in shadow, and the building on him on this side is in some sort of direct sunlight. So they are indeed way down. Bradford Young really likes to really drop his exposure on exterior day shoots. You can watch any of his films, Them Body Saints in particular, and you're like, whoa, everything is really, really down. And I personally love it. So the sun is clearly on this side of frame somehow, and I have a feeling that they're just using some sort of incredibly diffused large frame outside of this to soften up his face, like a 12 by bleached muzz or something like that. And they're probably bringing in some sort of negative fill on this side to create even more contrast. So negative fill over here, creating contrast on this side, and probably some sort of huge soft diffusion causing the sun to disperse the light like this. That would be what my pitch is about how they do that. But I just think it's interesting to see how different DPs are creating different shape in the same setup. Okay? Now, this is one that I wanted to show you really quickly. This is another Bradford Young doorway scene that's lit in a completely different way because of it being night. It is very blue. Is front lighting is coming from below her eye line. The reason that I know that is because you can see where her nose shadow is. It's going up in this direction. So that means that the fixture is a little bit below where her eye line is at. And so I think that this is supposed to be motivated from the approach of these headlights right here. So these headlights are what are motivating this image. But notice again, they've definitely flown a 12 by or an 8 by of some sort of incredibly diffused rag, bleached muzz or something like that, to just wrap it around her face and make it more not appealing but more beautiful, prettier. What is the word that I'm looking for? Let me know in the comments below what word I'm looking for. It's been a week, y'all. Okay, so again, just wanted to remind ourselves, what is the ambient level behind them? I think that there's a reason for that. I think the reason is it helps create the contrast. It brings our eye directly to the character. If it's super bright back there, we're like it's like muddies up our point of view and what we're seeing. This is the reverse coverage. This is the thing that I wanted to point out on the Jesse Plemons side of things, which is like, if they did not create large sources on both sides of Jesse Plemons, where they're illuminating here and they're creating a back edge there, this is what it looks like. He's just completely silhouetted against these hot lights. Now, in the Plemons and the Killers of the Flower Moon example, that's because this whole space right here is bright daylight, but it's still the same. Like, you're still exposing for what's beyond there. So great. These are just a couple examples. This one I'm going to go through really quickly, and we're just talking about what's difficult about this, right? This is shot by Robert Yeoman. This is Wes Anderson's first feature film. It is called Bottle Rocket. This is such an incredibly difficult frame to shoot. Notice that the stuff that's going on back here is darker on exposure level than her skin tone, but not by much. You can see that she is just softly flat lit. I have a feeling, I don't know this to be true, but my guess would be that they probably have some sort of softbox outside this window, a large source that's just pushing level in, and Owen Wilson has kind of stepped into her light, and that's just the way the blocking works, and they didn't have time or the resources to shape it anymore. This is sort of what we see if we're not going into these scenes. I don't want to be, it's unfair to Robert Yeoman, who is an incredible cinematographer, to say that he didn't have a plan, but I just want to point out that how flat her face is, and that's what we're fighting against to try and get more depth and shape. Also, just as a caveat, depth and shape is dependent on the narrative, and Bottle Rocket is not like a super contrast. It's not the Batman, right? It's not Greg Fraser's the Batman. There's a very clear cinematic linguistics that they're exploring, and this is in line with that. So I don't want to be perceived as dogging Robert Yeoman. I think he's an incredible cinematographer, and I think Wes Anderson, his work for Wes Anderson is amazing. But I just want to point out, notice how flat lit she is. Okay, next. This is the opposite coverage, which is, once again, you can sort of feel how he is lit right here. He feels lit, mainly because you're exposing for the outside over here, and you're getting a little kiss of daylight. I don't know if they have a fixture out here hitting him that way, but if you notice, something is coming this way, some sort of fixture is shooting this way to fill in all of this sort of stuff, because if he didn't, he would be silhouetted just like this situation. Okay, now we're going to go into Cine Tracer, and we're going to talk about, hopefully a little bit more in depth, about how these images may have been crafted. Okay, friends, we're back. Cine Tracer has a certain number of sets that are pre-built for us, and this is the only set that has an open door in it, so I apologize that it takes place at a hotel, even though Bottle Rocket takes place at a hotel, and the others don't. I think the idea is that a door is a door. Let's get into the first images. And so basically what I did was, the first setup, I created something that was like possibly reminiscent of the coverage of Bottle Rocket, where I didn't create any sort of grip or lighting that would supplement or offset the quality of the light. So what we're just talking about is what is difficult about this scene, which is when we go into the camera, how do we create shape on this character right here? 2.8, let's open up a stop. So this is sort of what the natural, let me do this. So this is just sort of the setup, right? This is what I kind of want to talk about, which is the idea is that your character inside of the building is going to be much darker than the person outside of the building, especially when you're dealing with direct sunlight from behind them, like in this image that you can see right here. Our character standing outside is in direct sunlight. Our character inside is not in direct sunlight. This is what the setup looks like with absolutely nothing used to help it as far as control looks like. So that's what we're talking about, right? This is what we're working with. Okay, so I am going to go on to the second scene, and I'll tell you what my first pitch was to control a little bit of the image and how I did it. So I was using Rodrigo Pietro's example of Leonardo DiCaprio in Killers of the Flower Moon to try and craft what I think is how they made it, right? In Cine Tracer, unfortunately, you don't have diffusion. I'm going to hit up Matt Workman and say, hopefully, hey, can we get some diffusion in here? That would be really great. At least I can't find it. Let me know, are there diffusion frames in Cine Tracer, or any way to diffuse the light coming out of a fixture? Because that would be a dream. So what I've done is I've created a 12 by, which is essentially like a light that's created in Cine Tracer. So a 12 by sort of diffused light. And I am not directly hitting our lead, but I'm bouncing it sort of into the building and bringing an ambient level to replicate how sun bouncing off of things outside of a building would come towards our character. So this is what I have the other thing that I wanted to point out is, you might not be able to see it but in Cine Tracer, but this gray thing right here is a 4x8 solid. So it's like a floppy, like an open floppy, to create a little negative fill and a little bit of contrast in our characters. So this is what we're talking about, right? So this is what I've created to replicate Killers of the Flower Moon, which is a soft ambient push in coming frame right into our character as he's looking on towards the person standing at the doorway on his porch. And the background is quite dark. We have a negative fill as in a floppy to create more contrast just inside of the building, so that you could hopefully have, you know, sort of a stop or so difference between your right here on your key light and your negative fill side. So that is how I approached lighting the sort of Rodrigo Prieto lighting situation for Killers of the Flower Moon. Okay, I'm going to move on to the way that I thought I could create Jesse Plemons coverage, which looks like this now that we are inside the room. So what I did was I put a 4x8 bounce right here on the wall, so that this Fresnel, which is like sort of either these are all catch-all lights. So it's like, okay, is this a RE orbiter? Is this an M16? Is this an Aputure 1200X bolt? It's whatever it is. It's a hard Fresnel light that you can control, hopefully, the color temperature of. Either way, it's daylight balanced right now. Okay, so that is back edging our Jesse Plemons character, who is standing right here. That's this guy right here. I placed a bounce to bring a little bit more of a return onto his face frontally. And I've also created a large 12 by frame that is replicating sort of a diffused light. I know that the way that this works obviously isn't physically possible to happen because half of the frame is in the story above. But like, let's just say it's an 8 by frame that you're pushing level through bleached muzz, right? Something like that, or unbleached muzz. And okay, full grid maybe, some sort of diffusion. This is what the image looks like. Okay, so this is what I've created to be like the Jesse Plemons coverage. As I open up the ND a little bit, this is what I believe is the shape of the light that's created. So it gives you the opportunity of exposing your background to your character and seeing what that feels like. So really quickly, let me back out and show you what this coverage looks like if we just turn off what I would describe as the key light, and see what happens when I turn off the backlight, and we'll go back into the camera, and this is what this looks like without that level of exposure. So this is just coming from the bounce. That's interesting. That actually looks pretty nice. So what's the deal with this? Is this actually 0? Yeah, this is actually 0. So let me just delete that. Let me delete this. Great. And see now let's see. So I've deleted the bounce, which I didn't realize was actually giving ambient level itself just from the sunlight. So this is it. It still doesn't look that bad. It's interesting. Cine Tracer is boning me a little bit here because the lumosity and the photometrics does not seem to be adding up a little bit. But this still looks pretty good. Let me see what happens if I just delete this. This light goes completely away. Yes. Okay, so that's weird. You guys saw that, right? I turned down those fixtures to 0, I deleted okay, so it doesn't matter. This is what this image would look like if there was no lighting whatsoever. So just keep that in mind. That was the way that the next scene that I created was to feel like the Bradford Young arrival sequence during the daylight. So I just want to point that out a little bit about what we have here. So this is, I think, what we've got going on for the Amy Adams character. Our Forrest Whitaker character is in pretty direct sunlight. I know that it's softened up in the Bradford Young situation, but again, we don't have diffusion in Cine Tracer, which I desperately would love, which would give me an opportunity to just fly a like 12 by or 20 by rag above them and get soft diffused light. And so what I've done is let me back out here for a second. So what I did was I'm flying a B board just above our subject's head, which is just creating shadow. Again, I wish it was like some sort of 216 diffusion, or we could just fly a 12 by or a 20 by of full grid or bleached muzz, but I don't have that in this program, unfortunately. And then I just have a bounce here, just sending some return, because again, the sun is up here, almost directly above them. That's sort of where it felt like it was to me in the Amy Adams shoot or scene. Okay, so this is what it looks like. I know that the return is not exactly the same because I just can't control the top level of light as well. But I think this is the idea. You fly a rag above them to soften everything up, and maybe you have a beadboard to give some sort of return to create a far side sort of key contrast. Okay, now let's get into the fourth scene. This is how I perceived the coverage of Forrest Whitaker. Now, look, we got to grip jungle here, everyone, because, again, the program just doesn't give me the chance to do what I want to do. So what I did was, because the door frame, okay, just to explain too, is like, I didn't put the places in the door frame because there is this balcony all the way above them. So no matter what I did, no matter where I placed the sunlight, they would always be in shadow during the time of day that the scene actually took place that we're trying to replicate. So I just decided to build like sort of our own perceived doorway out in the parking lot. And what I did was I put up two floppies here to create levels of contrast to replicate the contrast level on Forrest Whitaker. I put up just a like flat wall here to be sort of representative of where the door frame would have been if we were able to build it ourselves, or to replicate the location. I put, this is a 8 by B board in the program, which again I'm using to just basically create the shadow so that we don't have harsh direct sunlight on our subject. And instead of being able to diffuse it, I've brought in like a 4x4 like light mat basically to kind of replicate what I think the sunlight could look like for the Forrest Whitaker coverage. This is not how they did it. I just want to be clear, because they have the ability to just use diffusion and let the sun go through it. I have a feeling that's what they did, probably a 12 by or something, an 8 or a 12 by to just diffuse Forrest Whitaker's character. But I do believe that they brought in negative fill on the other sides. And this is what I think that frame sort of feels like. Let me know what you think. Okay? Okay, great. I'm going to back out of Cine Tracer. Okay, guys, I think that's all the time that we have for today. Let me know how you feel about this. Have you lit doorway scenes before? And if so, how did you light it in a way that allows you to stay in line with the cinematic linguistics and the lighting of previous scenes in the film, but also get levels of interest and contrast and depth? How have you exposed the people inside the door, and how have you exposed people on the outside of the door? It seems like just a very, very quick look at shot that gives you the understanding that a lot of DPs do it in very different ways, and that's exciting. That's again why I want this channel to exist, because I think we just found 3 different ways to light this exact scene, and we just have to ask ourselves which is more in line with the cinematic linguistics and the narrative that we are finding ourselves in. Is it Bradford Young, where it's just top lit? Does your schedule require you for your characters to basically be top lit? Oh, you're going to have to shoot at noon to 3 o'clock. Maybe flying a big rag above their heads might be the solution, and then you can create contrast with negative fill. Okay, well, what if you have a little bit more control and do you do the Rodrigo Prieto solution, where you just build large sources close to the character and wrap it around your subject? And let me know if you feel like this is helpful or if it's not helpful. I'm so grateful to Jared Films for sending this idea along. Please, again, show him some love. Please let me know if there are any other setups like this that you're interested in learning how other cinematographers have shot it. And thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers. Bye.